"Can I fix it for food?" That was all the cardboard sign said. The words were jagged, written in fading strokes of black marker that bled into the creases of the cardboard. It was the kind of cardboard that once carried groceries or tools, now softened by rain, dirt, and too much handling. The man holding it sat cross-legged on the crumbling sidewalk outside a diner whose neon lights flickered weakly in the dusty afternoon heat. His name was Marcus. Once upon a time, that name carried weight, echoing in stadiums, chanted by fans, engraved on trophies. But now no one asked for it. No one cared to know who he was. To the world, he was invisible, just another worn-down figure blending into the forgotten corners of the town. Marcus's hair had grown unruly, peppered with streaks of gray that made him look older than his years. His beard was coarse and uneven, tangled like the path his life had taken. His shirt was ripped near the collar, showing a chest that was still broad but scarred, a map of battles long since fought. His jeans sagged, bleached by the sun and torn at the knees. His shoes were perhaps the saddest sight, so thin at the soles they looked like paper, the fabric splitting at the seams to reveal skin. Every step he took was a reminder of how far he had fallen. The town had grown used to him. He had become part of the scenery, like the cracked pavement or the rusted signpost at the corner. Marcus had been sitting outside that diner for months, maybe years. No one kept count. People passing by didn't ask why he was there. They didn't ask what his sign meant. They just looked away, because looking at him meant confronting something uncomfortable. The truth that success can vanish, and anyone, given the wrong turn of fate, could end up like him. Every now and then, a car would slow at the intersection nearby, its driver catching sight of him through the glass. Some pretended not to notice. Some stared too long, eyes filled with pity they didn't dare voice. And some chose cruelty. Fix it. Fix what? Your life? A teenage boy yelled from the back seat of a car, his laughter spilling out like poison. The driver honked twice before speeding away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Another time, someone tossed a soda can at his feet. It clattered across the sidewalk, sticky remnants spilling onto the concrete. The crowd at the diner window laughed, shaking their heads at the crazy old man. But Marcus never flinched. His eyes didn't harden in anger, nor did he bow his head in shame. He simply picked up the can, set it neatly aside, and folded his hands over his sign again. His eyes remained steady, calm, eyes that carried stories too heavy for words. Unlike others in his position, Marcus never begged. He didn't rattle a cup for coins, didn't chase down strangers with desperate pleas. His sign didn't say hungry, though hunger gnawed at him daily. It didn't say homeless, though he hadn't slept under a real roof in years. It didn't even say veteran, though the scars across his body hinted at a past filled with battles. It said only, "Can I fix it for food?" And that puzzled people. Fix what? A car? A toaster? Their lives? Nobody ever asked. Nobody cared. But those who laughed had no idea that behind those weary eyes was a man who had once been faster than the wind. A man who had gripped a steering wheel with nerves of steel at 200 miles per hour. A man whose name once commanded respect in every racing circle across the country. Marcus wasn't just a homeless man with a sign. He was a legend in hiding, buried under tragedy, silence, and years of pain. And soon, the town would discover the truth. The diner was alive with noise. Grease popped on the grill, forks clinked against chipped plates, and the jukebox in the corner hummed with a tune from another decade. But above it all was the laughter, sharp, careless, and cruel. At the far booth, a group of young mechanics from the nearby racing track had gathered, their uniforms still stained with oil. They leaned across the table, smirking as they swapped jokes. And their favorite subject? The man outside with the cardboard sign. "Can I fix it for food?" One of them mocked, holding up an imaginary sign and pretending to shiver. What's he gonna fix? His shoes? His brain? The others roared with laughter, nearly spilling their sodas. Another chimed in. He probably thinks he's some kind of superhero mechanic. Old man can't even fix his shirt. Look at it, hanging off him like rags. The group erupted again. It was easy to laugh. Easy to treat Marcus like a joke, because to them, he wasn't a person. He was a story they told each other to feel better about themselves. A reminder that at least they weren't sitting outside with a sign. Just then, the diner's door creaked open and slammed shut with a bang. Heads turned. Outside, The screech of tires and the smell of burning rubber cut through the air. A sleek black sports car rolled to a jerking stop in the parking lot, its hood steaming. The driver's door swung open, and out stormed Troy Whitman, young, rich, and arrogant, the kind of man who strutted instead of walked. He was the rising star of the local track, known more for his ego than his skill. Troy was tall, sharp-jawed, his racing jacket gleaming with sponsor patches. "Dang it," he cursed, slamming the car door. "Not today. Not before the big race." Everyone in the diner watched as he popped the hood. A hiss of steam rose into the air. Troy waved his hands angrily as he muttered under his breath. The mechanics rushed outside, eager to prove themselves. This was Troy Whitman, after all, the golden boy of their track. "What's wrong with it, Troy?" one asked. "Engine's dead," Troy snapped. "My mechanic's sick, and the race is tonight. If I don't get this fixed, I'm out. And I don't lose." The boys leaned in, checking fuel lines, spark plugs, wires. They tugged, twisted, and fiddled, but the engine groaned stubbornly. Nothing worked. Troy's frustration grew louder with every failed attempt. "Useless. All of you," he barked, running a hand through his slicked-back hair. It was then that Marcus shuffled closer. He had been sitting silently, just a few feet away, watching with those calm, steady eyes. In his hands was still the same cardboard sign. "Can I fix it for food?" He stopped a few feet from the car, cleared his throat softly, and asked in a voice rough but steady, "Can I take a look?" The laughter came instantly, like a reflex. One mechanic nearly doubled over. "You? Fix this? You can't even afford a wrench." "Yeah," another snorted. "Go fix yourself a sandwich, old man." Troy sneered, eyeing Marcus up and down. His gaze lingered on the tattered clothes, the ragged beard, the worn-out shoes. "You? You don't even have a car. What do you know about fixing one?" The boys laughed harder. To them, it was absurd, the idea that this homeless stranger could solve a problem they couldn't. But Marcus didn't argue. He didn't shout back or hang his head. He simply stood there, waiting, the cardboard sign tucked gently under his arm. His calm silence seemed to unsettle some of them, though none would admit it. The engine hissed again, mocking them all. And there, in the growing tension of the parking lot, Marcus waited patiently. Not for pity, not for charity, for a chance. For a long moment, no one moved. The steam from Troy's car drifted into the desert air, twisting like smoke signals from some invisible fire. Marcus stood with his sign tucked under his arm, steady as stone, while the group of young mechanics smirked and elbowed each other. Troy finally broke the silence with a scoff. "You've got 5 minutes, old man. If you mess it up, I'll make sure you don't set foot near this diner again." "Deal." The mechanics burst into laughter again, certain Marcus would humiliate himself. But Troy wasn't joking. He was desperate. His reputation, his whole career, was tied to the race tonight. If the car didn't run, his sponsors would walk away. Marcus gave a small nod. "Deal." He wheeled himself closer, his movements slow but deliberate. His gnarled fingers brushed across the engine as if he were touching an old friend. The mechanics leaned in, waiting for him to fumble. Instead, his hands moved with uncanny certainty, testing the tension of belts, tapping the carburetor, listening to the faintest ticks and knocks. After just a minute, Marcus murmured, almost to himself, "Fuel lines clogged. Ignition coils misfiring." And he paused, his ear close to the engine. "Your timing's off by a millisecond." Whoever tuned this didn't know what they were doing. The mechanics blinked. Even Troy froze. How could a man with no tools, no shop, and no money diagnose that so quickly? One of the boys tried to laugh it off. "Oh yeah? And what are you going to do about it?" "Spit on it." But Marcus ignored him. His eyes were locked on the engine, focused like a surgeon before an operation. He reached into the pocket of his worn jacket and pulled out a tiny roll of tools. Old, rusty, but cared for like treasure. The sight of them silenced the crowd. These weren't the tools of a random drifter. These were professional grade, worn from years of use. With steady precision, Marcus got to work. He unclogged the fuel line with a trick so quick the boys barely saw it. He rewired the coil with a twist of copper pulled from his own sign's frame. He adjusted the timing by ear, no fancy computers, no diagnostic machines, just raw instinct and experience. The mechanics exchanged uneasy glances. They had all been trained in modern garages, with sensors and tech. None of them could imagine tuning an engine by sound alone. Within minutes, Marcus wiped his hands on his ragged shirt and stepped back. "Try it now," he said calmly. Troy hesitated, his arrogance faltering. He slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The car roared to life. Not a sputter, not a cough. A clean, powerful growl filled the parking lot, steady and strong. The diner windows rattled. The jukebox went quiet. For the first time all day, the laughter was gone. Troy stared at Marcus, wide-eyed. The mechanics were speechless, their jaws slack. And Marcus? He simply picked up his cardboard sign again, holding it with quiet dignity. "Can I fix it for food?" The roar of the engine lingered in the air like thunder after a storm. Troy revved it once, twice, and each time it purred cleaner, stronger, like a beast finally awakened from its cage. The mechanics stared in disbelief, shifting awkwardly on their feet. One finally muttered, That's impossible. Nobody could have fixed that without diagnostics." Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't smile or bow. He just stepped back, his face calm, as though he'd done nothing unusual. But to Troy, it was extraordinary. He climbed out of the car, slamming the door shut, and marched toward Marcus. His expression was hard, but behind the bravado was something unfamiliar to him. Respect. "Who are you?" Troy demanded. "Nobody just pulls that off. Not like that." The mechanics leaned in, waiting for the old man's answer. Marcus hesitated, his hand tightening on the handle of his sign. His eyes, deep and weathered, seemed to drift far away, as if seeing another time, another life. Finally, he spoke. "Once, I was a driver." The boys exchanged puzzled looks. "A driver?" one repeated. Marcus gave a slow nod. "Races, circuits, tracks you've only seen on TV." The mechanics gawked. "No way. That's not him. He's a legend." Marcus Cole disappeared years ago. The cook stepped closer, trembling. "I watched you win the Phoenix 500 back in '94. You overtook 3 cars on the final lap. Nobody's ever done it like that since. I'd know those eyes anywhere." Marcus looked down, almost ashamed. That was a lifetime ago. The truth rippled through the crowd. The man they'd mocked, the man they thought was nothing but a homeless drifter, was a legend who once stood at the very top. Troy's jaw tightened. For the first time, he didn't see a beggar. He saw a man who had lived the dream he was still chasing. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why are you out here, with a sign?" Marcus's gaze grew distant. "Because life isn't just about what you win. It's about what you lose. And I lost everything that mattered." The silence that followed was heavier than any roar of an engine. No one dared to laugh now. The cardboard sign in Marcus's hands no longer looked pathetic. It looked like the quiet banner of a man who had survived both glory and ruin. The air at the racetrack felt different after Marcus's name resurfaced. For years, the pit lane had been filled with noise, revving engines, shouting mechanics, and the smell of gasoline. But now there was something heavier in the air. Respect. Curiosity. All. When Marcus admitted who he was, the world he had hidden from seemed to come flooding back all at once. Photographs began to resurface online. Old magazines with his face plastered across the covers, arms raised in victory. His name was on trophies collecting dust in forgotten cabinets. The Machine, they used to call him, because when Marcus Cole got behind the wheel, he became more than human. Now, the man who once wore victory wreaths around his neck stood before them in tattered jeans and broken shoes. Troy was the first to break the silence. He walked up to Marcus, no longer sneering, no longer cocky, but humbled. He held out his hand. "Mr. Cole, will you teach me?" The young mechanics looked at each other in disbelief. This was Troy, the loudmouth, the kid who thought he knew everything, asking guidance from the man he'd mocked only hours before. Marcus studied him. His eyes softened, and for the first time in years, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "But first," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm, "you owe me that dinner." Laughter rippled through the group. "Winning," he said, "doesn't mean much if you don't know who you are without the trophy." Over the weeks that followed, Marcus became a fixture at the racetrack again. Not as a driver, but as a mentor. He taught the young racers more than mechanics. He taught them patience, focus, and humility. He showed them how to listen to an engine like it was alive, how to feel the road beneath the tires, and most importantly, how to respect the machine and themselves. The kids who once mocked him now carried notebooks, scribbling down every word he said. Even Troy, who once laughed the loudest, became his most devoted student. And though Marcus never asked for it, the racetrack quietly began to take care of him. A room above the garage, clean clothes, a bed that wasn't concrete. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. One afternoon, a reporter asked him about the sign he used to hold, the one that read, "Can I fix it for food?" Marcus smiled, weathered but proud. Because sometimes, people don't need money. They don't need pity. They just need a chance to prove they're still worth something. The man the world once mocked as a homeless nobody was no longer forgotten. He was Marcus Cole, legend, mentor, and proof that even when life takes everything from you, dignity and purpose can be rebuilt. A racing legend, reborn.